Hi, welcome to 5 Insider Factoids, answers to questions that I've been asked about Raider, which is Miranda Chase number 5. Warning, I will be using spoilers, so read the book first. Let's jump in. First off, the helos that I mentioned in Raider. These are incredibly innovative. They're so cool. I love these two birds. Um, the one on the left is the Raider that was talked about a lot in the book, has gone through a lot of testing for the Army to replace their small helicopters. And the catch is that helicopters, the fastest one out there is about 200 miles an hour for a military helicopter. It's the big Chinook is actually the fastest one around of the production military helos. And the Army said, can we get there faster? And they came up with the Osprey, which is the big tilt wing thing that can act like an airplane, but it's very big, it's very complex, it's very expensive, breaks a lot, um, and they're getting better about the braking part. But they said, how do we get innovative, especially in smaller birds? And so they came up with the Raider, which on the left side of the screen is it's got dual rotors, so that means the rotor blades are shorter, and because it's dual counter-rotating rotors, so they spin like that, it doesn't need the rear rotor to stop the helo from spinning around. That's the whole thing the rear rotor does is keeps the thing moving in alignment instead of spinning. So with that space freed up, they were able to put a pusher propeller on the back. And you can just see it in this image. And so they take off just like a normal helicopter, shorter rotors so they fit into tight spaces, and then they've got this pusher that can drive them ahead very quickly. Incredibly innovative. A lot of stealth technology went into this. Really brilliant design. And then they said, well, we also want to replace long term, we want to replace the Black Hawk and the Chinook. We want to really step up everything. And so the one on the other side is the Defender, and it uses about 80% of the same parts. It uses the same engines. It uses uh, there's so much overlap that it makes service easy. It makes part supply easy, and then they were going to scale that up once more for the Chinook. However, what happened was this is brand new technology, brand new thinking. They didn't put the proposal together all that well. So the Army said, nope, we're going to take a shrunk down version of the Osprey and the V8, V280, I think it's called, um, which has these big tilt rotors that sit up in the air and spin and then tip forward for when it acts like an airplane. Takes a lot of space, very complex, uh, and but it's technology that's been finally figured out in developing the Osprey. What I find really funny is the Night Stalkers, who I wrote a great deal about in my romance series. Uh, they, as soon as this decision was made, they said we will be keeping our Blackhawks. In other words, they're not giving up the smaller, more compact, more efficient birds for this ugly piece of engineering. So the Defender got canceled, the Raider got canceled, and the V280 is going to go up, and the Night Stalkers are going to keep designing their own helicopters. So that's what's going on. But this book is about Raider before it was uh, the project was canceled. Now I brought on a new character here, which is Andy Wu, Captain Andy Wu of the 160th Night Stalkers, right? I already knew about them, so but I wanted to play with them after the fact. And a lot of the characters I'd written in the 160th were either active duty or they were somehow larger than life. And even when they retired to Henderson's Ranch, they were doing grand things. And I wanted to try taking somebody who is just a person, exceptional pilot, but she's got a lot of challenges. Um, her co-pilot was killed next to her, and so she's got wicked PTSD in flight. Um, and So she's got really fierce PTSD. She's fighting that. She's trying to make choices of what her life is. She pictured herself in the military all the way through. She was the test pilot on the Raider. She was going to take that bird out into the field. And suddenly she's out of the Army because she can't deal with it and is now trying to figure out how to put her life back together. And she sort of stumbled on the NTSB and gets assigned to Miranda because of the testing of the Raider. The other thing that she is, and I didn't know this when I started writing the character, she's very wealthy. And the reason I did that, I think, and I'm not even sure, but I think it's because Miranda is quite wealthy. And while the other characters aren't, um, I wanted somebody for whom the money could never be an issue. And it hasn't been for the other characters, but not knowing where this was going to go 4 books from now, which we'll talk about in White Top, it was, I wanted somebody who was her equal in that way. But she doesn't care about the money. She doesn't want anything to do with it. She was all set to be this high power lawyer in the high power family law firm, and she just wants out. She's trying to be herself, despite all of these societal pressures to be someone else. And one of the things you have to do when you're building a character is put some of yourself into the character. And my dad had very definite ideas about what he wanted me to be. Uh, Wealth was not one of them, but he was continuously upset with my not stepping into engineering, not stepping into physics, not stepping into each of these paths that he saw so clearly that I belonged in, not realizing I didn't belong in any of them. So I wanted to play with that dynamic as well and give that to a character and see what her struggles were and how she addressed doing that, short of just ticking off her dad, which was my method. Uh, Now, terrain following is what I detail that in this book, and I just wanted to explore it a little bit because it's really cool what they can do these days. The technology is they actually have a high resolution map of the surface of the Earth, and I'm talking probably 1 to 2 meters accurate. And I've been told from one of my few sources that it's pretty much the whole surface, definitely any battlefield area. So if you're going into Afghanistan, the helicopter had a full, what's called a wireframe image, and I'll show you what that is in just a sec, of the landscape, every shape, every turn, every condition. And this was developed, a lot of it was developed for training the pilots who were going to be flying into Afghanistan to make the simulations real. And then they went, huh, we could wire that into what the pilot sees. At least I think that's what they've done. And that's where I ignore the facts a little bit, is I don't know some of this stuff. So some of it's conjecture. I know that they've had the terrain following since mid 2000s. So here we are 20 years later, they have to have integrated that into the view. So let's look at the technology they actually have for a moment. If you look on the left, the 3 pictures, that's what night vision can do for you. It can take something that you can't see and enhance it with infrared, with light magnification, using multiple technologies. They can turn it into effectively a daylight view. They can't do color yet because color requires a light source reflecting off the surface to bring the colors out. But black and white, crystalline view. You can get a crystalline view. The image on this other side is that terrain map I was talking about. So, ignoring the facts, I said, what if they can layer the night vision technology over the terrain map and be able to look at both and see what's coming around the next hill? So they can fly, and they're getting continuous satellite updates if it's a high crisis area of who is over that hill? Who's hiding behind that crest? What's around that corner? But as a pilot, they can see by this approach, oh, I can fly here, and then there's an opening there, and then there's an opening over here. So they can fly approaches that are let them stay very close to the nap of the Earth and not be surprised with, oh, there's a cliff there all of a sudden. They can see the cliff coming. So that's the where the technology is on these things. It's just, oh, I love this stuff, obviously. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about Turkish power because Turkey is my villain in this one. And one of the interesting things is the Turkish mindset isn't, oh, we're this country that happens to hold control over the Black Sea and Istanbul is where Asia and Europe connect. They used to own, the Ottoman Empire used to own most of the Mediterranean and the Red Sea access out to the Arabian Sea. They had another access up in the Persian Gulf. They were the superpower of the 1500s, and they still had an immense amount of that control right up until World War One. So for them being trapped in this small lozenge-shaped space, which is actually quite large, um, just it makes their brains hurt because they still see themselves as the Ottoman Empire. And so they will continue to, with time, try to push out. Italy and Greece, they try to survive. France is another strength. Germany's an economic strength. But Turkey sees itself as a very important key player in the Med. And with the work they're doing, they're going to keep growing unless they have a horrid misstep and crash, in which case they'll climb back up again. But it's part of the mindset that they have earned the power because they had 500 years, 400 years experience, probably a lot before that. I didn't research that. Um, that they deserve the power and they know how to manage the power. And so it's not all that strange when they start striking out in different ways. They're testing ways to grow and be stronger. So I thought that was really fascinating to encapsulate some aspects of that in this book. And the last question I get is a fair bit is about Air Force Two. So Air Force One, we all know the big 747s. They're actually only called Air Force One when the president is aboard. These planes are actually only called Air Force Two when the vice president is aboard. But the purpose of the Air Force Two planes is to move, occasionally they'll move the president when a 747 can't fit in somewhere he needs to go. But the vice president, secretary of defense, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, if these guys need to go somewhere, these are the planes that probably do it. So these planes, like Air Force One, you can run a war from them. They have a command center up forward, and if you see the little row of about 5 windows together, that's the vice presidential suite. It's much smaller than the one on Air Force One, but it's there. And it has a press space and a secret service space and communication staff and battle coordinator staff. So, and it's got a lot of extra communications equipment, defense equipment. So if somebody shoots at it, it can dispel chaff. It has a lot of advanced technology to detect aggression against it. So if you look at the little line of antennas sticking up along the top and the bottom, that's so it can talk to pretty much anything, anywhere, at any time that it needs to. And so these are actually very interesting planes that we don't hear much about because they aren't Air Force One. So that's why I took Air Force Two out for a not so comfortable joyride. And it was really fun seeing how much I could do. I actually made it a mission of how many damaging things could I do to Air Force Two in the course of the book. And there were quite a lot. It was I had a good time doing it, as you'll see if you haven't read it. Anyway, That's the short answer to the 5 questions I get about this book. Please visit mlbuchman.com for their books, newsletters. You can contact me with other questions. There's also bonus stories and free short stories if you subscribe to the newsletter, recipes, all kinds of good stuff. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.